Hey there, it's Kayla. Welcome to my channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you are not. Today we're going to be talking about The Hobbit. I don't know if you're aware, but Middle-earth March is a thing. I discovered the hashtag in the end of February, and I was like, oh, I'm hopping on that bandwagon because I loved The Hobbit growing up. When I was a kid, I would go to rent movies with my mom, and one of the ones I rented religiously was the, I want to say 1977 cartoon version of it. And I was obsessed. I rented it all the time. I loved the music in the beginning, the songs that the dwarves sing, like that's what Bilbo Baggins hates.
Shift the glasses, crack the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. So carefully with the plates.
Like, I just remember that. It sticks out in my childhood. And the trolls, the part with the trolls really scared me. And it was definitely like my first foray into fantasy, and probably would establish my love of this genre in general. So shout out to my mom for letting me rent that shit because it was game changing for me. I also remember going to summer camp and playing Scrabble, and one of the words I tried to spell was Hobbit, and I was probably like, I don't know, 7, but I spelled it H-O-B-I-T, and they were like, that's not how you spell habit, and I was like, no, it's Hobbit. And they were like, one person was arguing with me trying to tell me Hobbit wasn't a thing, and another person was like, no, Hobbit is a thing, like looking at me like I'm a total weirdo, and they were like, but that's just not how you spell it. And so I don't know, it's always just been something that I've held near and dear to my heart. I just loved the movie as a kid, and I read the book in middle school. So I haven't picked it up since then, and I decided in honor of Middle-earth March, why not try to read all of them? The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So I finished The Hobbit a couple of days into the month because I'd started it in February, and I love it. I loved it so much. I think it's super nostalgic. I think it's a fun, like, adventurous fantasy story that will make you feel all kinds of ways. It's very cozy. Going back to Middle-earth is kind of like putting on like an old comfy sweatshirt that you've had for a long time but you haven't pulled out of the back of the closet in a while. So it has like this kind of older like smell that you recognize that you haven't smelled in a long time, and you miss it, and you didn't know that you missed it until you put it on, and that's what it was like starting to read this book for me. It's a much easier read. I think it's very accessible, like for just a regular average reader to pick up this book and read it and actually like it. The tone of it is just fun and adventurous, even though it tackles some of like some sort of darker subjects like Gollum and the spiders and just the general battle at the end. It handles it in a very not whimsical but like childish sort of manner, as since this book is geared toward like children, I believe. You can definitely tell a difference in the writing in this and the writing in The Fellowship, which I finished a week or so ago. One of the things I really loved about this is the change that overcomes Bilbo. In the beginning, just like a strange kind of weird conversation with Gandalf, he gets like anxious about it, and he's like, man, I should eat a couple pieces of cake even though I just ate breakfast because I think that would take my anxiety away. And they go on their adventure. Lou, quit. Sorry, my dog is like digging in my closet. And then like the whole forgetting his pocket square and they have to go back because he doesn't have a pocket handkerchief. Just like things like that. And then in the end, you know, he's going out of his way on this adventure to help people, to help Thorin and the dwarves, and he just changes so much on this adventure. It's really wonderful to watch that happen. And the way it's told, the writing is so beautiful. It's definitely much more plot driven than character driven. So Bilbo is pretty well characterized, I think, and then the dwarves kind of feel like one entity where they're just kind of fun and stubborn and just an enjoyable group of people, whereas there are quite a few of them. You don't really get any perspective other than Bilbo's, and so the only dwarves that have like that even really stand out are Thorin and Balin, which is fine. It's a short book. It's only 300 pages, so the time had to be spent elsewhere, and it was spent in world building and the plot, and I think it's really successful as far as that goes. In the end, the Battle of the Five Armies, unlike in the movie, which we're about to talk about, Bilbo is knocked out, and so he just sort of wakes up after it's all over. There's not really any action written about it, So you do lose some parts of it, and also the dwarves don't see the demise of Smaug because he leaves the cavern and Erebor and goes to Lake Town and just starts trying to destroy Lake Town. The scene in the movies where they're all like, the chaos is happening and I don't even remember what it's called. Basically they pour a bunch of molten gold in a dragon whose body is like so hot that the gold would never melt when it was poured on top of him. And that whole scene, which I did not enjoy, was not in the books. Basically they just like chill in the mountain. And then they're just like, what the hell happened to Smaug? And then eventually a raven comes and is like, hey man, all clear. And then, the rest of the book commences from there. So like I said, my family, my husband specifically and my 10-year-old watched the 3 Hobbit movies after I finished reading the book. Like I said, this is 300 pages. It's only about a 6-hour audiobook, I believe. Pretty short, and it's 3 movies that are pretty long. And so I know that there's quite a bit of hate toward them, and after reading it and then watching it consecutively like that, I can understand why people would not like the movies, especially if you're a book purist. I think there's parts of the movies that really brought a lot to characters, but then I also think there's parts that were dumb and unnecessary. So let's go ahead and talk about this now, I guess. So one of the things I think the movies did actually do well was the characterization. I think that Thorin, Keely, Feely, Balin, I think you just get more, you just get more personality out of each dwarf. They seem more individualized as opposed to just being one large group of people. And then also there's a lot of parts in the book where Gandalf conveniently isn't there, and they just say that he's off doing whatever wizards do, kind of. And then because of that, something happens and the dwarves have to figure out how to get out of it, and it basically Bilbo saves them without Gandalf being there, and that kind of develops the relationship between Bilbo and the dwarves. Well, in the movie, they show what Gandalf is doing, which is essentially dealing with the necromancer, meeting up with Saruman and Galadriel and Elrond, I believe, discussing what's going on, and just the whole rise basically of Sauron before Frodo gets the ring in Fellowship. So I actually don't mind that. I think it was cool to see what Gandalf is doing, to give more perspectives into what's happening in the world, and to kind of understand how these things affect the whole story that ends up taking place in The Lord of the Rings. I also liked the Battle of the Five Armies, sort of. There's parts of it I liked and parts of it that I did not like. I do like that you actually get to experience it, whereas in the book, because of the audience that is geared toward, I feel like it was easier to just have Bilbo be knocked out and not take place. Then you wouldn't have to write the violence and all of that in a book that didn't really cater to the audience that it was for. So I did enjoy that. I also thought in the movies, if you haven't watched the movies and you haven't read the book, I guess this is a spoiler, but in the book and in the movies, Thorin, Feely, and Keely die in all 3. And in the books, I think Thorin's death is sad, and the last final conversation between him and Bilbo made me cry. I thought it was really great, and I thought it was done fine in the movie. I thought it was good. I mean, I thought the actor did a great job of portraying Thorin, and so I did enjoy his take on it. It's a little bit different though, but the lines are the same. I did appreciate that they used Tolkien's actual dialogue from the book. But Feely and Keely in the books, they just say they died. And there's no real emotion because, one, you don't really get to know them very well. You just know they're the youngest dwarves, and they're the ones who end up having to do quite a bit of the things that the other dwarves don't want to do because they're older. And 2, because they just gloss over it because Bilbo didn't see their death. He wasn't there when they died, and they just say Feely and Keely died. And that is sort of that. And then they talk about that being the end of Durin's line, which is sad. But either way, I liked seeing the deaths. Specifically, Keely watching Feely die in the movies is really hard to watch. And Keely avenging him. And then the whole Toriel thing, who I don't mind as a character, I wish they wouldn't have made it a romantic love. I wish she was just somebody like, I don't know, trying to help the world maybe, as opposed to being motivated more so by the romantic aspect of it. There's not really, I don't think there's any female characters in The Hobbit, so the addition of her is understandable, and I get why they would add another person or a character like that. I didn't really like the addition of Legolas, although I did laugh when he was talking shit about baby Gimli to Gloin. That part made me chuckle. They also had the storyline of the Pale Orc as Thorin's, like, you know, nemesis, which wasn't necessary. No. I think that would have been fine without him being there. It added a little bit, I guess. There's a part where freaking Legolas is about to fight him in Lake Town. He has his bow out, okay? Who doesn't picture Legolas with a bow, first of all? So he's got his bow out. He's been shooting all these other orcs. Him and the Pale Orc lock eyes. He puts his bow away and takes out his little sword. And I was like, what are you doing, man? Just, what are you doing? Fucking do what you do best and shoot him. Can't you just shoot him and then fight him with a sword? I don't know. And of course he gets fucking wrecked because this orc is a badass giant monster orc, essentially. And Legolas is fast, but he's not like super strength, like muscle wise. Like, I feel like shooting him a bunch of times and then fighting him with a sword would have been a much smarter move on his part. But what do I know? Those are my thoughts. I mean, I think this is a pretty simple video. I really love the book. I am super loving The Lord of the Rings. The Fellowship video is coming up, which I have so many thoughts on. Loved it so much. So yeah, give this video a thumbs up, like and subscribe. Comment your thoughts on the movies, I guess, and the book, and maybe the differences between them. Like I said, I liked the first one. I feel like they go downhill from there. And I liked the song being included, but honestly the cartoon one takes the cake for me. Anyway, I'm getting out of here. Stay tuned because there's more to come.